Oh, here's Richard. You're in time. Okay. Main Street.
We're going to start, if you can join in. This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is called to order. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Vogel,
Yes?
Commissioner Schwartz, Commissioner Friedman,
Here.
Commissioner Sandberg, present, Commissioner Maybe.
Here.
We'll now have a moment of silence. Okay, please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First order of business tonight is the consent items. Is there a motion to approve the consent items A through H? Or does anyone need to hold a consent item for consideration? Sarah?
I don't need to poll, I was just seeking clarification. If I may. So, the committees, which I think we're all still kind of learning a little bit about their functionality and their protocol. So I'm trying to understand when we are giving these approvals for the appointments, is it that the entire committee has reviewed the applicants and made a choice? The chair of the committee, the chair and the vice chair, who's making the recommendation that we're approving?
So for these particular ones, so I can go into how it usually works and how it's working this time. Usually all the applications go to the committee. All of them are always provided to the commission, so you always see all of the applicants, but they will come with a recommendation. In this case, the number of applicants matches the number of openings.
Okay.
So there's no decision really, except whether to appoint or not appoint. But there's no choosing between applicants in this case.
So if there were choosing of applicants, is there a matrix that they use? How do they, what's the determination of who they recommend to us?
Each committee should in their bylaws determine how they represent the applicants to it. I'm not sure if everyone has that outlined in their bylaws. but it should go through a process. Should be the chairman of the entire committee would vote on that and then present it to the commission as recommendations, but it's still the commission's final choice.
I have feedback on that. As far as the planning board, when there's more than one candidate, for example, like in the last round, they interviewed 4 people for 2 positions. Warren, am I correct on that? And intensive interview, I think good questions. And then it was voted on and then recommended to the commission. So that's an example of one. I'm not sure how other, like the tree board tends to be one candidate
That's
each
the
time.
next.
Oh,
Yeah, we had a meeting with tree board last week, and all the applicants here were at the meeting. And we had a fellows application, we met everybody. We've got, we're trying to expand the tree board anyway, so this is falling in line with that. We're heading towards 7 or 8 people. Yeah. So we did read all the applicants.
thanks. So is there a motion for the consent items A through H?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we pass the consent items A, B, C, D. All A through H.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
Or.
Commissioner Friedman,
Or.
Commissioner Sandberg, or Commissioner Maybe.
Yes.
Motion passes. There are no proclamations tonight, and there is one scheduled public comment. There's Scott Buckner and Brian Bale. Am I saying it correctly? Lyle, that's right. From AU2S with update regarding Livingston's water reclamation facility.
It's not Buckner, is it? What's
Thank
his
you.
name?
You
Oh, sorry. That's a wrong Brian. I'm so excited with that. I'm sorry.
so used to
It's my name correct.
Well, thank you. This is basically just a check-in for you, to show you where we are approximately in the schedule of the project, the budget, timelines, and show some pictures off of progress made to date. So, next slide. This was the second week of August. We provided an update in October that took you up to October, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on what has happened since, but this was essentially day one. It started with a test pit dug there at the sludge drying beds. Next slide. And this is what is out there today, and even more. This is the reactor number 1 of the CQT batch reactors. Each one of these basins is about will hold about 1 million gallons, 22 feet deep, 150 feet long, and 48 feet wide. It's hard to capture the scale of it without some humans in the photo. And a few of you were able to attend the tour over the holidays. When you get down in there, in the river valley, you really get a sense of how big these basins are. Next slide. This is just showing that the way they got to this point was a lot of dusk to dawn type schedules. So starting early in the morning and working until the evening, especially on some of the bigger 4 days. Next slide. It's just showing the other basin. These basins are essentially complete now. We're just they're working on some surface repairs and waterproofing of the basins, and they will static test them, make sure that they're watertight in about 2 weeks, and then we'll start to put equipment in them and get ready for startup this summer. This is just a center walkway that'll be between the 2 basins. You'll be able to walk across here to access equipment and test the mixed liquor and make sure it's operating as intended. This is how it stands today, as it shows now. All the walls are poured and cured, and they're starting to work on the metals and finishing. This This basin's tinted, so they have to build protection for it and heat it for that waterproofing Cypex material. They're using a final finish on this that's a relatively new product. It's a crystalline surface edge agent that will seal these tanks up. So we anticipate a good leak test coming up in a couple weeks. And that's just a photo of some of that surface repair going on today, in fact. Switching gears to your new control building. This is late November. This is footers were formed. They're starting on some of the starter walls there, and you see all that conduit under there. This construction is pretty specific. When you have that much conduit, it's all because we have so much equipment in there, a lot of horsepower. So it's a very technical project, and so far it's going extremely well. Next slide shows the progression of that control building if you were out there as of last week. So the walls, CMU walls are all up, starting to put in ceiling joists and putting in internal walls. And I think Shannon would like to set up a tour here in the near future, and you'll all get a chance to get back out there and see it kind of in its straight. This is showing some of the excavation around existing utilities, which was always our biggest concern on the project. I have several slides here showing trenching, where we have to lay new pipe for the new facility and having to weave their way through lots of conduit, electrical conduit, lots of pipe. Some of this we knew was there from record drawings on past projects, some we didn't. And some of it's in service and hot, and some of it's not. Some of it's empty and nobody knows exactly what it was for. So that's been the most challenging part of the project today. Next slide. This is just showing some more of those crossings. And that has slowed them down a bit, and I'll show you on the overall schedule where we sit. Next slide. So picking their way around it, in some ways picking their way through it and having to do some on-the-spot repair. I want to compliment your staff at the plant. They've been rolling with all of these punches today. They've worked very well with Dick Anderson, making sure that when they need to support them in order for them to get their work done, they do. A lot of shutdowns and bypasses going on, and Dan and his staff's been fantastic about working with them. Demolition, this was a big day. They finally picked this old lid out of your anaerobic digester. It's 80,000 pounds. There's one more of those to come. And they tried that 3 times before they were successful. They didn't have, the crane was certainly capable of it if you've seen that crane, but the linkage, the fastener and the pick were not. And so they had to go back and redo that and pull it out of there. It weighed about twice what they anticipated. Coring contact basin work is fully underway. This is what you used historically to get your tortuous path through the coring contact basin to get more kill with pathogens. Those baffle walls have come out, as you'll see in the next slide, and they formed up all the new support walls for what will be your new UV building here pretty soon. So we've reused that UV basin, and in the next month or two, you'll see that building come to life. The way they got there again was just a lot of very long days, starting before dawn and ending after sunset, especially on those wall pour days. So they've been fantastic, very proactive. Like any contractor, it's hard to get them to get paper plans in front of you, but they get on the phone and tell us what they're doing. We talk to Damon throughout the day, every day, about what's happening. Next slide starts to get into some of the paperwork that we go through. We meet every other Tuesday, including this morning. We go over their 3-week look-ahead schedule, which gives us a little bit more resolution on what's happening in the short term. And then we have a project-long year and 3/4 schedule to bounce that off and make sure that we're looking at the long view and making sure we see what's coming up in the next couple of months and be sure that everybody's ready for it. This is a progress chart we put together for you monthly, just to show a little bit more schematically about where we sit, because nobody wants to look at those Microsoft project schedules. Excavation, we're showing up at the top there, is a little bit behind just due to having to slow down through all those existing utilities. Concrete, they're a bit ahead of their schedule. Electrical is slightly ahead of schedule. Equipment is marginally behind, and that's in large part due to they've been moving so fast that the number of submittals that have been coming through have hit in a huge slug, and we have to review all those and make sure that the equipment they're ordering meets specs, and that has taken some time. But we're coming out of the woods on that, and some of these equipment items have 12 and 16-week lead times, so this equipment needs to be on site this summer. And then, excuse me, back up one. Buildings also a little bit ahead of where they thought they would be. Total project progress, we're about a third of the way through this, and that's reflected in their payment applications. So we have 373 days remaining to final completion, so we're about a year away. Next slide. This is your budget that we bounce back and forth with USDA, DEQ, finance, your bond council. We still get together about every other month and discuss this and where we are and where all the funding agencies' money is coming in. People are getting paid on time. What I want to drill down a little bit to is that $985,608 contingency. So next slide. I'll just give you an idea where we sit as of today. That contingency represents about 6.7% of the total construction cost. We've had one construction change order to date for $58,767.94, and that was broken down between a blower upgrade that was elective, that just made sense for you, was the lion's share of that. The rebar was an addition for $12,025, so that's the only true construction change order at this point. But our design fee amendment that you awarded us also came out of that money, as did Northwestern Energy's customer agreements for both gas and electric for the new facility. So you can slice this and dice this a number of different ways into how you look at it, but the next slide shows that total right now we're sitting at 1.88% of total construction cost. If you take out the design amendment we were awarded, we're sitting at 0.66% of total construction cost, which is very good at this point. Another way of looking at it is that $707,399 of that contingency is still there, which is about 72% of the total contingency at the start of the project. Next slide. Any questions or comments, or if you all have a desire to come out and take a tour, we can wait for the weather to improve or put it on the faster track.
Commissioners? When would a time for a tour work for you? Want to wait a month?
Oh, I'm flexible.
Can do that?
It could be a Monday or a Friday on the schedule, and maybe over a lunch hour. Those of us that work, so we can attend. I wasn't able to attend the other one due to work schedule.
They are, you may have noticed they don't work on Fridays. They do 410s now, and that's their plan through the rest of the project. And I don't know, I think they're good with us doing a self-guided tour on Friday, or if they want to be there.
Their field manager's still on 7 Fridays.
So just do Friday.
Yeah, just the labor is usually pretty low.
So that might work out well and be safer, I think, when they're going full bore.
Yeah, we're not holding anybody up or anything, walking through. So. Yeah, pick a Friday. at lunch.
12:30, is that too late for lunch hour? Okay, so,
Looking at this Friday.
or do we want to wait until maybe the end of February? Yeah.
In February,
There's
it might
storm coming.
be on that control building, be a little bit more to the EV building.
There's not much more to see than what we've really shot.
Or going
Right.
into March, like Friday the 2nd of March or the 9th? That'd be better as far as timing and condition.
I know the second, I'm available. Ninth, I have to travel.
Yes.
So we're 12:30 on the 2nd of March.
Great.
Yeah, Friday. Yes.
Okay. Friday.
March 2nd. I have one question, just out of curiosity. The pipes and the challenges you had with excavating that area, are those all still functioning pipes that are still used in the city and by the city?
Most are, some are not, and some we knew could be abandoned. Some of them are true just discoveries.
Does that add costs when you hit that kind of snag, or is that usually just a part of the process with this project?
I expect that they will propose a request, a change order for time and labor on that. They have to submit that, basically make a case for it, and then we would review it, and then review it with Shannon and Dan. And yes, if we believe it to be fair, then we would come to you at that point.
I think we kind of anticipated that anyway from talking that there's a lot of unknowns underneath the ground out there, stuff like that.
We had essentially kind of 3 milestone projects that you've done in the past out there, and we had as-built information for that. It was decent. But a lot of that stuff was done on, say, a single one-off little project that nobody documented, and that's not terribly uncommon.
Any other questions? Commissioner Sanders?
So I had a question, not on the project, but on the permit. That, I'm just hoping you can clarify for me. When it was presented to us back on the change orders that we just recently approved last month or the month before, it talked about, which was presented in our packet, that with the permit was resulting in an improvement in the city's fluent discharge requirements, including relaxation of the ammonia limit and complete removal of total nitrogen and phosphorus limits, which for me just raised a red flag because, we're in the Yellowstone Eco Shed, and I was like, what does this mean? You guys were not here at that meeting, but it sounds on face value that was provided to us that these limits are, well, it sounds just like it is, that they were removed.
Right.
So in communicating with the DEQ and looking at the renewal fact sheet, that's not the case. I mean, we are still being held to limits. What seems to be different is that at one point Livingston had a mixing zone that they were allowed to use with the flowing of the Yellowstone River. And I'm sorry, I'm speaking in layman's terms. I'm sure you guys have more scientific for it. That was able to help disperse and dispense that discharge. And it sounds as though the city, not keeping up with its requirements, lost that permit. And so what happened with this new permit is you guys were able to then recapture that mixing zone back into the equation.
So years ago, at some point, they awarded you with the mixing zone and dilution credits to go with that. At some point, they required folks to prove that they deserved the mixing zone, and you all hadn't.
Right.
They let us do a desktop mixing zone analysis for you and submit that, and they bought off on that and said, yes, your mixing zone is still valid, essentially. Someday they may make you prove beyond the desktop study that you deserve a mixing zone.
And if we were to lose that, that's going to affect the design of this considerably, even though it's been done.
Right, it'd be like discharging into a creek, or you'd have to have a single event where the Yellowstone was flowing at like 100 CFS or something incredibly low for them to take away your pollution credits. So that's why it's advantageous to be on the big river and be a relatively small city.
No, I understand that. I think it's, I think what's listed here is perhaps different than on face value than truly what is actually in the permit, as far as what I can read and from what I've gathered communicating with the DEQ. That it's, by using that mixing zone, it's not as if we're just saying as much nitrogen and phosphorus that we can dump into the river as well. We still have limits, whereas here it's saying removal of all limits. And this, I guess I just wanted to clarify that that's not accurate.
The draft permit that they had for you as of May of last year had total phosphorus and total nitrogen limits in their summary sheet for the permit, basically saying these are on your horizon because you don't have a mixing zone. Those were limits we wanted to get out of there because those limits, first of all, were unattainable. And there are many communities in Montana dealing with that issue right now. We knew it was an error on their part and pointed it out to them, and they said, okay, we'll submit the water quality analysis and support the mixing zone, and we'll get rid of those. So that's what we did.
And that, I guess that's what I'm saying. It's the mixing zone that was allowing to help us meet the requirements. Because the DEQ is still saying you can't dump as much nitrogen and phosphorus as you want.
No, you don't.
I
You
mean,
don't
there
have
are
a
state
limit.
standards. So I'm just clarifying the language of what
You
I
don't-
did my own research to understand, because again, on the face value, it sounds as though what was written and what was provided to us is that we could dump as much nitrogen and phosphorus as we wanted in the river. And that's not the case.
In a
Thank
way you
goodness.
could, but you wouldn't, and you are not. The only numerical limit you have right now is ammonia.
Right.
Nothing for total nitrogen, total phosphorus, and a lot of people do have a numerical limit. You don't, but that doesn't mean that this plant won't remove some nitrogen and phosphorus.
So you're saying our permit would allow as much nitrogen and phosphorus as we want?
Outside of that ammonia component of the nitrogen.
And then as far as the ammonia, I was reading that we have a compliance schedule starting in, well, I guess it started in January of 17. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so you have to show them that you're making progress towards meeting that ammonia limit. You don't have to meet the 3.1 milligram per liter until by a couple of years out. You're gonna be done with this project and meeting those effluent standards before that becomes an enforced numerical. I think it's
Are those limits changing, or was just that our system didn't meet the current? I mean, is it? I guess was it both or just one?
that limit is new for you.
Okay,
Yes.
is that just a statewide change then, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Everybody now has an ammonia limit for the most part, unless you just have a ridiculously great mixing zone, like you're on the Missouri River in the Dakotas or something. Wisconsin.
I think all of those are toxic to fish habitats. Many biologists would say
Total,
nitrogen and phosphorus.
well, that,
Everything affects the pH.
those regulations are coming from what's not have algal blooms, is what's pushing those low total nitrogen, total phosphorus limits. But they're looking at your contribution to the Yellowstone, and essentially saying that you're not causing algal blooms between here and Mississippi.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
So tonight we don't have any public hearings or ordinances. And we have two resolutions. Resolution number 4778, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign a general service agreement with Four Corners Recycling LLC.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the second time we've seen this resolution. First time was the draft version that was in the last meeting. So this is the final version of that agreement with Four Corners Recycling. Nothing significant change, except they did give us some reductions in cost for glass recycling if we met certain volumes, which will save us some money if we decide to go with glass recycling in that phase. The one thing I would like to mention on this is we have not made a decision yet on glass recycling, but these are the parameters we would use with them if we decide to use them for our glass recycling. So we'll at least have those set up, and then as we go forward and look at what we want to do with glass, that would be the conditions that we would use them under, and then we'll see if there's a different solution. Or if we want to go with recycling, what we will probably be an issue we need to look at in the next couple of commission meetings, just in terms of the next one. Other than that, it's substantially the same as the one you saw before, and the administration recommends an approval so that we can sign this and continue with our recycling.
Mr. Cardes, do we have any public comment?
Yeah, Darrell, do I come up to the microphone?
Yes, please come up to the microphone, sign in, and state your name and address.
I'm Wendy Gibson, and I'm interested in the glass recycling. I think it's an excellent idea, and I don't know whose department needs to look into it, but I'd like to see what other cities are doing as far as glass recycling. I think it's excellent. The last place, I'm a renter, and the last place I lived, I bought the coarse glass and just landscaped all my flower beds, and it's beautiful. And I know you can't encourage, well, or you can encourage local homeowners and whatever to use that. Also, I've read where glass can be used, of course, the finer grind can be used in highway material. And I thought, you know, just if somebody can do their homework, I think recycling is just an incredible idea, especially because glass doesn't break down. It doesn't biodegrade ever. And I think what we've done is just outstanding, and I hope we always keep that as part of our recycling. But I'd just like to see someone do their homework, or maybe I could, and see what we can do as far as continuing it. It's beautiful landscaping material. I mean, year-round your flower beds sparkle, but not everybody's, we all decorate different inside and outside. But I'd like to really, really see that continue. So.
Wendy? Any other public comment? Last call. Any public comment? All right. Commissioners, any comments, concerns? Commissioner Sandberg.
Just a question since I missed the last meeting. I know the recycling discussion is,
Could people get closer to your mic? Sorry to do that.
how about even use the mic? Sorry. Okay, so I missed the last meeting, and I was just curious if there was a discussion in regards to
I think we all like the idea of recycling, but we keep passing back and forth the idea of how we're going to pay for it and whether or not the community wants increased fees to pay for it. So was that part of any of the discussion last week before we?
There was mainly in response to glass. Glass is the biggest cost right now. In fact, it's what we're not doing because of cost.
Right.
We're currently just stockpiling, trying to find a solution. This is a solution, but if we choose this one, and there are other options out there, so we can look through all of them, but we will need to find a mechanism to pay for it.
And you're referring to glass.
Glass specific.
Okay.
Yes, we're right now, the city's absorbing the extra cost in cardboard recycling and the plastics recycling. We do get some return on the cost as we sell it back, but it's still an overall cost to the city right now. But we're able to absorb that currently under current fee structures. Glass we cannot. If we do go to a glass recycling based off of this model, if we were going to pass that cost on to residents, it'd be about 50 cents a month per garbage can that's out there right now. We could look at different structures. Obviously, currently commercial entities, specifically the bars downtown, use it at probably a much higher rate than residents.
Sure.
So we could look at charging a flat fee to commercial users, to include places like Chico that bring it in from the county, and look at see how the county wants to partner in that. I don't think they have a large glass recycling need outside of some of the commercial entities. But we could look at flat fees for commercial entities in the county as well as in the city, and then see what was left over to pass amongst the residents. So there's different ways to do it. We just would have to figure out how we want to do it and if it was worth the cost.
So basically, by approving this recycling, still the final determination regarding glass will come back to us for future discussion and decision.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Schwartz.
My screen's froze up. What is Four Corners looking at per ton to take the glass?
The glass, they give us a few different rates. I said that on the volume depends. The flat rate would be $60 a ton for the recycling. If we went over 100 tons, that would go down to $57.50, and then over 150 tons down to $55. And there's still the full cost for that as well.
Right, and then as opposed to having just dumped with the regular trash, refuse, 50, what are we paying?
The actual cost to the city is somewhere around, what's current? 48.
48. So, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the big thing right now is even if we just took the glass that we're taking and put it in, that's $48 a ton that basically whoever the users are getting for free. So it's free recycling right now. So that probably is also not sustainable, just putting it in our own.
Right, yeah, we're gonna run out of space eventually. Just to answer Libby's question, I believe we're the only town in the state that takes glass, period. So, and there's no mandate to take the aggregate, to use it in roads or anything like that. I thought there was at one point, a long time ago, but there's no market for it, so
The city has been able to use it in a couple of cases, the capital landfill, the county's landfill.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
We used
did
some
do
glass for that, so that was a good use for it. But yeah, currently we don't produce enough as a city that any contractor is interested in trying to get our amount for asphalt. We just don't produce enough. So yeah.
I was wondering with Montana State University's art department, which is huge, have we ever offered them to come dip into our glass and take it back for their students? Because that's one media they do use. They do pottery and wood and painting and stuff like that. And I thought, well, there's stained glass. That's one of their media. That's just a thought. I thought we could contact MSU and maybe they would have one of their students that would be willing to come get a truckload every so often, whatever their need is. That was just a thought.
I yield.
Any other commission comments? Commissioner.
I was just curious, is there, what kind of venues or what other commercial uses or possible customers have been investigated for the glass?
So for the city of Livingston, we've looked at a few things. What it really comes down to is there aren't any commercial industries that are really interested in getting our glass. We used to ship it down to Denver, I think, to the plant, but there was too much trash in it for them to take, so they stopped taking it at that point. We don't pulverize it ourselves. We have a pulverizer that doesn't get to an area that's really useful for anybody. So really, we're looking at either a commercial recycler or just disposal at this point. Those are really the only feasible options that are left. Thank you.
One thing, I have heard that Bozeman is leaning towards glass recycling. Have you heard?
I'm not sure what they are.
I think they're in the process of somehow figuring it out and doing it within the city at all the drop-off points, which would be nice to know about when they get to that. I think personally, from the recycling standpoint, it is something that our community as a whole seems interested in. And I know through the time of being on the commission and then way before that, as someone who was interested, recycled today, that it has been a struggle with glass. And my hope is that we find some type of answer to recycling glass, and I know that the amount that's dropped off by businesses could be one of the factors that we could consider, and maybe a fee or a smallish fee that I know I talked to you about just recently, where the fee was reasonably or a reasonable cost versus a high cost where it becomes too much to handle for their small business. So I'd like to continue this discussion until we figure something out to make this work. But that's me. We're moving on, and I apologize, we have to move on. Yeah, during public comments, we're going to try to stay on track and in order. So if you have a public comment later to give us during public comment time regarding recycling, then, or in this case, the glass, and or the point of the discussion, which is to approve this document, we can add to it later.
Madam Chair.
I'm
This
Dave
is-
Leverett.
this is
I'm
Dave
Four
Leverett.
Corners Recycling.
Okay.
If you'd like, is that I can give you a little bit of history of what's going on with Gallatin County's glass recycling. Is when you say Bozeman, the drop-off sites are actually operated by the Gallatin Solid Waste District, which is the county-run program that has the bins placed within the city. It's run by the Waste District. And there is no momentum on the Waste Board to go ahead and add glass to the sites. As far as the drop-off of the locations, mainly because of the hosts at the sites don't want the mess of glass. And Livingston is the only municipality in the state of Montana that is currently collecting glass. We collect glass with tons of private individuals who do all the recycling for Yellowstone Park, the Gallatin County Waste Board. We are launching in April-ish a fee-based drop-off for the general public to come in glass. We've previously always supported the private enterprise as far as picking up the glass and bringing it to us on it, but it's got to the point that there isn't enough of the commercial entities picking up the glass and there's enough public that we just bring the one item out to us. So that will be being launched April-ish as far as the drop-off locations. But as far as the Gallatin County Waste Board, they're not interested in adding glass to their drop-off locations. That helps you.
Yes.
So,
Great information. Commissioner Sandberg.
If we're not recycling the glass, why are we allowing people to continue to dump it?
So for how long has it been since we actually recycled? It's been 2 years.
Actually, a year ago, we actually had Dave come over and take the stockpile we had. So we started at ground zero about in May of 2017, and we built up about 160 tons since May.
So we've been,
That's my question is why.
we've been accepting it on the basis that we're trying to find a solution to recycle it because it has been something that's important to the community, or at least it's been expressed consistently that that's something the community would like to do. So we've been taking it on a stockpiling basis, hoping to find an answer. We do now have an answer, now we just have to figure out how to fund it. And currently there's 3 options that we can go into that when we actually get to it. The only one is truly recycling that I know of. There's some stuff I need to confirm on some of the other options, but if we cannot find the recycling option, then we'll just add it to our solid waste at some point.
Because right now, the proposal here would be more than our solid waste if I just added it, right?
As far as what it costs, yes,
Cost the city,
absolutely. There is no current method of disposing of glass or recycling of glass that's going to be the same or cheaper than just disposing of it. That's just the nature of the cost. So as a community, we'll have to decide if we're willing to pay the extra for this.
Right. I guess I'm just looking at the fiscal impact of, we've been stockpiling for so long, and if we don't find a solution and then we have to haul it away, I mean, regardless of what we do, it's going to be a large fiscal impact at an immediate moment because we have been stockpiling.
Well, we'll actually have the option to do it over time. Once we make a decision on glass, if our decision is we're going to stop taking it, then we can slowly dwindle the stockpile over time. We don't have to do it all. So we can do it over a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever we do. If we find that MSU wants it for their art program, we can keep it for 10 years and let them take it for their art program.
I'm sure we could use the land for something better than stockpiling glass.
Well, right now it's not an area that's in a way. I mean, there's quite a bit of space a lot. So it's not a difficulty on us, but we would give them probably a couple of years. But yes, there would be a cost associated with that. Even if we go to recycling, there's going to be a cost associated. So.
Thank you.
So is there a motion by the commission to approve resolution number 4778?
I make a motion to approve resolution 4778.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4.
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Sandberg, 4, Commissioner Maybe,
Yes.
Motion passes. Next, we have resolution number 4779, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign a construction agreement for maintenance with the Montana Department of Transportation. Mr. Carmen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is my favorite kind of resolution. This is with the Department of Transportation for them to use their money to chip seal geyser, which is great. The only requirements from the city is that we meet some of the signage requirements, some of their urban route requirements as far as speed limits, signage, things that we already meet. So there's not a real significant change to that. We will take over maintenance at a time when they're finished with this project, which is standard. But in general, it'll complete the project that they've already started with the sidewalks and the ADA compliant intersections there. This will go to actually the chip seal on the road, and they'll go on to finish that project sometime this summer.
Do we have any public comment regarding resolution number 4778? 79, sorry. Commissioner comments? Questions? So, is there a motion for resolution number 4779?
I'll move that we accept resolution 4779.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Maybe and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4.
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Sandberg, 4, Commissioner Maybe.
Yes.
Motion passes. Tonight we have 3 action items. Action item A, B, and C. First action item is to discuss the transportation study recommendations and implementation. Would you like to start with commissioner comments first, or public comment, or Mr. Cardis, would you please give us a outline of what we are discussing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've got flipped in your packages. The important page starts on 125, which is actually the list of projects where they currently stand and the rough schedule for when they're implemented. Many of the projects are already underway. Some of them will require coordination with the tree board and other entities. The calendar Fruit Street project will probably wait until it warms up a little bit so it's easier to put some signs in. Most of those are pretty straightforward, and we can use single funds to the employees to accomplish them. Some of the larger projects are going to take a lot more scheduling. So we just kind of wanted to give you some of the, I guess, the steps that will need to be taken. Not all of these projects are obviously on the list of things that are going to be done, but they're on the list of things that have been recommended. If you go to page 126 and 127, the MTP, NBT involvement projects, those are the ones that are going to have either long timelines or we're going to have to determine how to pay for them. Most of the other ones are fairly straightforward and will start in earnest this summer. The other ones, you kind of see a project estimate, which shows you how much they cost, shows you some of the funding options because we haven't determined how to fund those yet. And then some of them are complete MDT projects, which is the last one on page 128, which is I think, the actual interstate lanes. So this is just presented to you kind of as an update of where we are, what we plan on doing currently, and options that we can look at in the future. So any input you have, we will take and see if we can add it into the schedule.
Great, thank you. Please come up if you'd like to have public comment regarding action item A, which is to discuss a transportation study.
So are we actually taking action, or we're just discussing?
This is just a discussion. There's really, it's really just for your input to the administration, and we'll go back and see if we need to change any of our priorities or our current plans.
But I'm
So
assuming,
it's not an action.
so I'm assuming at any time we can readdress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. This was just to kind of give you an introduction and an update on where everything is.
So, Sarah?
Yes.
Sorry, finish, sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was just seeking clarification. Apologize.
No, that's all right. I was going to ask based on that question. So as time goes on in the next 3 months before really the projects start, will we have opportunities to address in more detail some of the plans? Or is this where we're going to go at this stage?
Well, as far as the plans go, and that's why I included the traffic study, that outlines exactly what will be done, or at least what's recommended to be done. For most of these, you probably won't see them again as far as, marking parking zones and site triangles and that kind of thing. We'll just start doing what we can. As well as the through street, I don't expect to see that again unless you have some objections to some stop signs up for the through street. Currently, the larger projects, and definitely the ones that haven't been funded yet, will come back before we decide how to fund those. And we'll give you some updates on that. We can set a set time for updates if you'd like every 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is. Obviously, not much is going to happen in the next 3 months. Most of these will be summer type projects, so we can do it before the summer project or after the summer projects, or I guess whatever it is that you're interested in knowing and seeing.
Public comment.
Patricia Grable Tool for East Calendar Street. I appreciate transportation studies, but I also know that there are such a lack of parking studies in Livingston, Montana, and it affects everything. And I would love to see a serious look at, as a matter of fact, we're going to do a presentation of the downtown organizations on this. we have at least 400 residents who live in downtown Livingston. Most of the hotels that were built to accommodate 30,000 visitors a season on 6 trains a day are now occupied by people, pretty moderate income housing, senior center, Miles Building, and so forth, even the Graybo. And when I started the Graybo, usually cities or small towns even have what's called a PUD, a planned unit development. So that when people like me come in to develop a building, then the city says to me, and where are you planning to park the people who are living in your building? And there has been no look at all at those close to 400 people who live downtown. So I've been driving around at night, and I've been working with Mayana Rice, who was a city planner for 20 years for Bemidji, Minnesota, and was the city planner for Bozeman for a year. We have at least 60 cars that park in front of buildings like mine, like in front of the some of the businesses on Main Street where the people live upstairs. We always wanted to develop our upstairs, but we were so short-sighted in where would these people park. And so what we are proposing is a parking plan, the initial structure of a parking plan, which would include possible places for these various buildings that are occupied by significant numbers of people to park, so that they don't park in front of a going business. The man who just went out of business at Sears said one of the problems he had was people at CHP and residents parking in front of his business, of course, so it was hard for people to get there. I think that we should have a parking plan that works with whatever plans we have for our downtown. We always included when we did the Entrenco study, of parking in the alleys, possible $10 a month parking certificate on your car. So there's certain places, if you're a resident, you could park that is not obstructing businesses. We're taking a serious look at pocket parks. There's a device you can just put on the ground, and you can take your credit card and charge your parking on some of the parking places where people don't use their entire parking lot, and they could make a little money on the side by having a pocket park.
I got the app on my phone
There you go.
from when I was in Houston.
In Houston. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a presentation to the commission on this, because we feel like when we're talking about going to a one-way street with 50 extra spaces, and we don't address residential parking, and we don't address alley parking, and we don't address pocket parks, then I think we're remiss, because those residents may well fill up those additional 50 places without our having the intelligence to figure out a viable plan. So even though I value transportation studies, I think the city is in a point right now where it needs to take a serious look at a parking plan. And so Downtown Building Owners Board of Directors is really taking initiative on this with other organizations downtown. Just wanted to give you a heads up on this, because I think it's really important to address this.
Patricia. Mr. Cardis, do you have any feedback on parking plans in communities our size? Anything that you know that could answer?
So outside, like just normal parking. Obviously, I don't know of anything in communities our size. Obviously, larger communities have very method of parking. Obviously, Bozeman has done a lot of work on their parking structures. There is limited space in the city, and a lot of that space is privately owned. So if there was going to be a solution with the current spaces, it would have to be a private solution or a public-private partnership. which may lead to things like pay parking. We looked at metering Main Street as a way to control that. There was not much support for that with the downtown business owners, so that was one option we looked at during this reconstruction, because we could have built it with the current improvements downtown. That wasn't something that was very well supported, so that was an option that was looked at and not taken.
What option is that?
Paid parking, so metered parking downtown.
So we discussed that?
We discussed it with most of the downtown business owners, and there was really no support for it. And we did discuss it in one of our meetings as well. I forget which working session we discussed it in, because we talked about because there's different solutions. We could put conduit in for individual metered parking spots. We could do the, kiosks that are on the corner that then you could print out the ticket and stick it on your dash. That's another option. You could do, a technologically based solution that we could use without any infrastructure would be some kind of cellular based technology. There's a lot of parking now where it is an app. And if you're parking in this zone, then you go on your phone and you put in the parking for that particular area and it shows up on whatever equipment. But to enforce that, you also need to invest in all the equipment that can do that. So you need network devices that can tell you, hey, is this car currently a paying customer for this section? Fines are another thing we can look at. I just got my last fine from Legal Latvia. Parking in the wrong place costing €53, just in case you're interested, which is a significant fine. Ours are still pretty low. Ours are actually cheap enough that you could choose to use it as paid parking. So that's another option we can look at, is increasing the fines for the parking enforcement. We are looking at different ways to actually enforce the 2-hour parking downtown. It's going to be especially important during the construction season. So we have to make sure we look at that. There are a few options for that. You'll probably see those in the budget submissions, because we're going to have to look at how that budgetarily works out. And we've got a couple solutions that are working on that front as well. So we looked at a lot of different parking solutions. A lot of them aren't going to be city-centric, except enforcement. That's really the only thing that we can do. And even that has a cost associated with it. So we have to make sure that we do it in a way that's the most efficient.
Okay, follow up on that. So, you were alluding to various spots that were available being privately owned or et cetera. Have we, or have you and your team reached out to some of those individuals to start happening? The reality is we have no areas for parking. So if it is primarily, to just enforce downtown parking is not going to solve the problem. We actually need to find parking. So we need a solution. So have you started engaging in conversations with any of those people to get a temperature for how people feel about that? What options may or may not be on the horizon to help with finding a solution?
Well, we don't really have anything to offer as a city currently to private entities. There is the one lot that we rent, obviously, and we rent out for as private spaces. So that's one option that we've done in the past. We currently have that one. But other than that, unless we are going to take on the responsibility of renting those and then renting them out as the city, there's not a lot else we can do to rent that.
Well, you can also just say, hey, we need parking, you have space. Have you ever thought about, just having the conversation with somebody, whether it's just slots or it's an actual garage that would provide multiple levels. There are some dead spaces around. I'm just curious if we've looked at trying to engage in those relationships to help come to a solution.
We haven't as a city. I would assume that some of the business organizations would at some point. That was something I would assume would fall into their basket, is the businesses trying to form that kind of coalition to get some parking areas if that's what they're interested in, more privately.
Well, as a commissioner, I'm interested in it because we don't have any parking, and I know it's a problem. So I don't think it should just be the onus on the business people. I think it's a problem in our community, and I think it's our responsibility to help find a solution as a commission.
So what would we present?
You're the city manager. I'm just throwing out ideas of engaging with people, but I think it's, how we attack anything else. We have a problem. I think it's worth putting our heads together to find some sort of solution. And there's people out there that maybe we need to bring to the table to have the discussion. People, you know, perhaps the folks that own property that could be available and be used. But we find solutions to all sorts of problems. We do traffic studies to find problems for our traffic. I'm sure there's a way we can find a solution to our parking.
Well, we do have one solution, which is the Main Street one-way, which is going to be 60 extra spots. So that's one way we're looking at solving that problem. It really becomes, I mean, I can talk to a bunch of people, but I don't have anything to offer them. We're not ready to take on renting those spaces as a city. So I can ask people, would you be willing to create a parking garage? But I don't have anything to give them.
I know, but some people just, you know, not everybody wants something. You know, some people may be happy to provide to the community. You know, they may make a few bucks, but they may not. But it's a generous community that's provided a lot. So I just think open engagement and communication can maybe help solve the problems.
You know, off onto parking options. One of the things that is common on the coast, like Washington coast, Oregon coast, are the paid parking lots with the slots, like you referred to, which tend to be used during just high season. And because we do have that one parking lot, which is generally not used that often, and wondering if we could consider using or having that as a possible plan for dealing with parking and for locals as well. I mean, it's not completely used, is it? The 20s near the senior center.
No, that was actually all but one spot.
Oh, okay. Well, before it wasn't, so now I didn't know it had been completely rented.
Yeah,
so
it's
great.
usually completely full. I think there's currently one spot.
Great. Well, and when it comes to parking, obviously, it's an issue in our community that people need some options, and I hope we will continue working hard at it, and I think we are. And ordinance enforcement is probably one of the biggest issues for me, and I know other commissioners have stated that, and how we're looking at ordinance enforcement, which I think could help us in our working as well. Any other comments?
Well,
I would just say that with the ordinance, which I agree with, will help, but you're still displacing people and they have nowhere to go. So right now, business owners come downtown to open up their place of business and they have no place to park. Unless we want to start absorbing into the residential area, which is going to create a bunch of problems there. So the business owners are parking downtown. You know, so if we enforce and continue them to move, where are they going to go? That's the problem. There's no place for those people to park. So enforcing would be, I mean, you know, it might turn into, you know, paid parking, which refers to, you know, maybe then a parking structure of some sort if there's a private entity, if there's, well, I don't know, Mike, you've told me there's money to be made in parking garages. So, you know, perhaps folks can make money, but I'm just trying to look realistically that we have, I don't know how many businesses downtown that it's no place for those people to park. That work, you know, you have an owner, maybe 2 workers, 3 cars per business, where are they going to go?
Well, I know permitted parking is another option too. I feel like there are multiple options that we could look at, and
It would just be great to talk about it.
yes,
Get the ideas out on the table.
yes, I agree. Commissioner Bain, maybe you had your hand up for a second. You were like,
Just a second.
Yeah.
I'm curious, along with the parking study, there's a number of things that are already been decided, and that's what I kind of like to get refreshed on. As I remember it, the bulb outs have been eliminated. is the one-way settled decision for Main Street?
It was approved by the
Right.
commission.
And what else, or is there anything else that's been approved? Just those two items?
And the recommendations from that are stated here in the study and then by the city, was signage. So to go back a few years, it feels like, we started discussions on the safety of our streets. I know the three commissioners on this side had a lot of people talking to them regarding that issue. And so the state has had a grant that we somehow incorporated into using for this study. We had to use the money in that way and somehow figuring out various city-based solutions. Am I correct in sort of saying it that way? And then we started the study, waited for some time until the results came out, and they recommended making through streets on Callender, Lewis, and in particular, all the way to H on both. Am I correct in that? Yep. H to Park on both of them to help deal with the four-way uncontrolled intersections that are used as through streets. So a lot of us live in neighborhoods that have been used on street, right near corners that have people using streets in that way. And that is where the study pointed the city in that having through streets with signage on opposite corners was the solution. So, I know you've been to some of those meetings, but
Right.
I don't know if that helps you. On
Well, there's
just-
one thing that's in the traffic study that I know it's concerned a number of people, and at one of the meetings over in the library, and that is basically eliminating the parking on Park Street for, I believe, a turn lane. Now, where does that stand in future plans? Okay, I mean, that's what, I believe that's what I remember from the meeting at the library with the Main Street house.
It's currently not a part of any of the city plans. If, it's obviously a DOT road, and if they decide that that's what's required, I'm sure there's a lot we can do about it. I don't think they currently have any plans to do that regulation.
No, they don't. And just to remind everybody, that was just a schematic that our transportation engineer put over Park Street from Second to B Street.
Yeah,
So
my
that was not
understanding
approved, that was
from-
not approved by MDT, but
Yeah,
but based on his experience, if there was to be a street light at Second and Park, that's what the striping was like. So,
Thank you.
When I first joined the commission, long back probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm still on the board of the senior center, we were looking at the building behind us, which is owned by Cutler Bank. We're looking for more space to house people. Well, right next door to Carver was this beautiful parking lot. And I worked with Ed Mason at that time. And we finally got Carter to listen to the fact that they might want to rent that thing out. So I got together with our executive director and we said we would take so many spaces. Yeah, it's a beautiful location. The thing fell through. When push came to shove, I found a couple of, especially older, the senior population. If I can't park in front of the door, what the hell do I want to park in another place? So they want to disable, you know, rating the thing, so I found that out, but, we thought we could take 20 spaces and get rid of them, and it just, so I've lost track of it, but I could resurrect it, but it was so frustrating, because I felt, even if your park's there, the most you have to walk is a few blocks, it's still a great place, so I've seen a few things tried, and then it looks like it's gonna move, and it doesn't, I ask people. There aren't too many of those places around, unfortunately, but I found with parking of people, because even we do have, no pay a couple blocks outside of downtown, you park your car and leave it there all day long if you want to walk the rest of the distance. You're trying to keep the people involved in the business at least off the major parking things. Would be good to resurrect all this and keep going, and I think we do have to solve the problem. But we're very disappointed. It was going to be like $20 or $25 a month. And you would have a tag, and the meter gal could walk back her and see if the tag wasn't there, she could check it. So the whole thing was thought out, but it just never went off, never got off the right way. But I think we do have to continue to look at that problem. Most of the other spots are were all taken. And mainly by the people who work right, you know, but there's just a few of those places around. So, and now when I travel downtown now, everything looks like it's full besides. So then the gal that tickets for the city is a very important part of it. Because if people know she's not around, they take advantage of the apartment place. So that's another problem. I do.
Sure. Just a question back on the transportation study. So I like what I'm seeing here with signs that say cross traffic does not stop for the street. I'm curious, can we implement that anywhere else in the city too? I think a lot of the problems with the flow of traffic in town is people don't understand the traffic laws. And so people don't, if they come through and they have a stop sign, they're assuming the other side has a stop sign too, or if they don't have a stop sign, they're assuming the other side does. There's a lot of assumption going on. And then I'm just curious. I know I told Mike that we could have a traffic school and bring everybody down and give them $50 credit on their water bill if they attend it, just to refresh the traffic laws. But I'm wondering too, can we provide some type of schedule with, you know, providing warnings or tickets to certain, you know, focus on a few areas of concern to help maybe re-educate people in some of those trouble areas. And also, I guess the other two areas I'm thinking of is, you know, turning Calendar into Third Street, the speed at which people pump down Lewis and Geyser already, because they know it's a through street, they're way over the speed limit. And that's concerning to me too. And I'm just curious what we can do to be proactive to help change that behavior of our members.
We need police chief to answer that.
Give more bodies. The problem.
I walk my dog every day, and South Yellowstone up to Clark, take a left hand Clark towards Fifth. There's a parking stop sign on Clark at Fifth. 5 times out of 10, people coming from South Yellowstone, coming down Clark, go right by the stop sign. And you get cars coming pretty darn fast, so the police department can't be everywhere, but I mean, it just goes not. My way of solving Livingston, I stop at every damn point. Whether I get there right away, I don't have to run. I mean, I'm literally, I just do that, whether I ever stop it. I just very cautious, but I see the people like coming from the school of South Yellowstone, they pass Geyser, knowing that the next street, they've got to be careful. and they're going 40 miles an hour, slam on the brakes. And I see this all day long. It's very frustrating.
So I'm just-
I don't, you're just talking about,
Curious if there's something we can, I've been in communities where they'll set up speed traps, or they'll just, not necessarily giving out tickets, but pulling people over and warning them, or if there's a way that of to re-educate. Dale, sorry, if Dale can answer, or you, Mike, I'm just looking for solutions.
So there are different solutions depending on it depends on which road you're talking about. And, we're looking at some, unfortunately, every solution has a downside, whether it's cost and or community goodwill and or just, we could do some radar signs, but people don't necessarily like radar signs are the most beautifying aspect of the neighborhood.
Are those ones that check your speed?
Yeah, check your speed. There might be some areas that those are appropriate, entering parks. Obviously, we have flashing signs for school zones. There's not a lot more than we can do except up enforcement. And really, that's it. And that there's a cost associated with that.
Sure.
Obviously, there's some guys on patrol at the time. The only other real solution, if we're talking speeding specifically, is to have devices that stop people from speeding. So, ironically, one of those is bump outs on the curbs. Another one, they use those a lot on the East Coast just as speed control because they narrow down the road, which gives people the feeling that they need to slow down. So that's an option. Actual speed bumps are an option. And I'm not advocating any of these solutions.
Speed bumps.
Roundabouts are actually one of the solutions. If you put roundabouts out there to control speed, depending on the radius of the turn. Those are all speed control items that can be used depending with different levels of success and different levels of obviously appropriateness depending on what it is. But those are all ways you can address it. They all have downsides. So you just have to decide how aggressive you want to be and how permanent of a solution you want. Luckily, I think the best speed control device in Livingston is actually the drainage right now. Some of those, you're going to bottom out if you speed zero, so that's actually one of the best controls we have.
But I mean, if, like, to take some patrol officer and change their duty for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon to help re-educate people at certain trouble spots. I mean, that's somebody who's already on duty, obviously pulling them away from something else, and I get that, but I mean, that is potentially could be an option.
It is. The problem with that is people learn quick. They'll be good for as long as he's there, and then they'll go back to normal as soon as he's it's not a long-term solution. It doesn't change behavior, it only changes behavior when they can see what's happening. So it's absolutely something you can do, and it might be appropriate in some circumstances, but it's not going to solve the overall problem just because people revert back to their previous behavior once that is gone. But it's something we can do short-term.
So, question on Sarah's first question or statement, and that is with the cross streets do not stop sign. Are they generally permanent or are they temporary to add? Because we have been using them as a certain way for so many years in our community, which Laurel did the same thing. It's interesting. It's not the first town I've been to that does this, especially certain direction, north, south, or all the streets are used that way. So are these signs permanent or are they usually temporary? What is the usual plan?
It really depends on the application. So the only place those are really going to go that makes sense are on stop signs. Right? They're going to be below a stop sign that says the cross traffic doesn't stop. I think people already assume the calendar doesn't stop, so I'm not sure how useful they're going to be there. Maybe in Lewis that's something, because it really is just to notify people, one, who would assume that the cross traffic does stop for some reason, i.e. you're on a major road, if you're on Park Street, you assume everybody else is stopping. So if you had a bigger road that came through, you can find that says cross traffic does not stop because you had been assumed to have it right away. especially as we change things on the calendar, there might be a temporary use for them. But once you have them, you might as well leave them up because you've already spent money on them unless you need them somewhere else. So my guess is they would be permanent on those stop signs.
We can switch them out for the street cleaning.
Just switch them out if it's street cleaning sign. Yes, we could, but in general, they're probably going to be permanent, just because once you mount them, you're not going to take them down. And you really have no need to take them down. It's extra information that may not be necessary if it's not going to hurt.
One last statement on, one thing I wish this study said was that we needed a four-way stop on Yellowstone and Calendar as well. Because of how it is used by pedestrians getting to downtown. I think it's one of the most used corners in the whole community. One of the top five. As far as residential crosswalks, and it concerns me that that is still a very busy street potentially. And with people using Yellowstone to get to the park, it's a worry. But I guess we'll see on that. Any other comments?
Just the last thing, I don't really see it addressed here in the traffic, and I don't remember in the study, but did they address pedestrian traffic in the study?
As far as just at all?
Yeah.
In general, I don't think there's any specific section on pedestrian traffic position.
Just part of that corridor study, and,
Yeah.
and that's where the third and calendar recommendations came to put the pedestrian crosswalk signs and some pavement markings for crosswalks, and then the no parking from here to the corner to make sure that that the view shed or the sight triangle is adequate for pedestrians.
I was just trying to think, in a bigger picture, we have our trail system and I know the board that you sit on, committee, Quentin, the traffic, the safe.
Accessible street.
Yeah, active transportation.
Right. So maybe and I'm just, I know our request to the city manager was to implement the traffic study, and I'm just wondering, thinking out loud, if we're designating these pedestrian routes through the community as well, if we want to try and incorporate when the traffic study subject correlates or with a designated part of our trail system to enhance crosswalks or something that is helping promote the pedestrian safety in those areas that we've designated.
Are you working with active transportation to implement some of
We are, and actually,
theirs and ours?
I think the place where you'll see this flop over is in the safe and accessible streets policy, which is getting drafted right now.
Okay.
Okay, so we approved them to go ahead and draft that portion, so that is going to really cover that kind of, what do we need to look at as far as pedestrian safety, cyclists, all that kind of, how do you merge all the different kinds of transportation into one. So that'll give guidelines probably for upgrades as well. We also have the ADA upgrades going on, which obviously will also help with some of the pedestrian safety as far as on launch curves. So I think there's several initiatives that will address that.
Okay.
But the safe and accessible streets is probably going to give you the best real policy on how we look at that.
Okay.
And a lot of the stuff is coming out of the Building Active Communities initiative that Shannon and I went to last May, that we're hosting this year here in Livingston as well. So we have all those tools, and so that's with the plan that the active transportation is working on now. Will reflect all that we've learned. There.
Thinking of once we work on a place that we kind of capture all of those entities while we're working on that
exactly.
section.
No, yeah, Shannon's well aware of it too, so he's well versed in what's going on.
And that's exactly what the safe and accessible streets is meant to do, is to give those guidelines, so when we're doing projects, we look at those items.
Okay, great.
And vice versa, like you guys were using our street study and your information to make decisions. Well, I'm excited about how we're moving forward with street safety, saying it. Okay, that went longer than I think we thought. So on to discuss, or action item two, sorry, discuss no removal per Livingston City Ordinance Section 12-11 through 12-13.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So this was requested by the commission as well. So on page 130, you'll see all the current ordinances in relation to snow removal. This is snow removal from sidewalks by individual businesses. It's pretty clear. It gives you 24 hours. It basically says that you have to keep it clear of snow, ice, and slush. It tells you where you can dispose of it, in Boulevard mainly, and if you can't, then there are some exceptions in the downtown streets for businesses to be able to put it into the streets. Gives you the penalties for the failure to remove snow, $25 for the first offense, $50 for the second offense within the same calendar year, or within 365 days, and then $300 from that point on for the additional fines. And then it just goes into some of how that is actually accomplished. So that is the overall framework and the ordinances and how we enforce it.
Commissioner comments?
What prompted, did you guys discuss this at the last meeting or?
Yeah,
No,
yeah, Mel
no,
brought it
right.
up. You want to know the
Okay.
ordinance laws.
And do we don't currently enforce it, do we?
We do if we get complaints or if that we see there's something egregious, we'll do it. Obviously, we don't patrol the sidewalks to see who's doing, who hasn't. But if there's a problem or, you know, if there's a significant complaint, then we'll go out and check it out. Enforce it at that point. Obviously, the property owners are still responsible for any damages, for any accidents or anything that happen on the property. But this is just something that we have to be able to enforce that if there's a, you know, a vendor that doesn't clean their sidewalk for several days. Something that's noticeable to the neighbors or consistently doesn't clean their sidewalk.
Are we often implementing this ordinance and or ticketing?
I haven't received any complaints. I haven't, Jim's on his end. I don't think we've actually received any complaints. We haven't noticed any egregious offenders. So my guess is we haven't ticketed anyone for a while.
So like normal ordinances, or often they are through complaint only.
Depending on what it
Versus
is,
city.
yes.
Okay. Mel, do you have any?
Yeah, well, I've had several phone calls from various residents. I've got it's a question of 2 doors for me. The house has been empty for 7 years. Nobody entered it all. Yeah, yeah, so, it creates all kinds of little problems. Now, where would the phone call go?
Probably is going to be go to code enforcement, so it's going to go to the planning department. It's going to be the most effective because the guys are going to be passing out the tickets. So
So I
not
think,
dispatch. Let's put it that way.
so I think the newspaper would do us a favor of lives to say, you know, there are ways to handle this. And I had an incident happen a couple of weeks ago. I went to the recycling for the city, and I'm coming back to town on Gallatin, past the park, little park there. And I went to the right, and there's a woman sprawled on the sidewalk screaming. And I immediately stopped, and then another younger guy stopped. And I went over to help her, and I almost felt, it was pure ice. The entire block was pure ice. I'm trying to figure out how she got that far without, but we assisted her. The EMS was there within 3 to 5 minutes and carted her off. It's just a real heck of a problem. So I'm very sensitive to it. I know I get on my my sidewalk as soon as they can. But I think if people realize that they can make a phone call and there are ways to handle it, I think that's the best we can do.
One of the complaints that I have heard is because we have people who live here very part-time, 2 months out of the year, 1 month, own houses, and then don't have anyone maintain while they're away.
That's a whole other.
Yeah, so. Any other comments? Any public comment? Lynn?
Yes, Lindy Gibson. I have a quick question. How far does the city limit go as far as like walking out to McDonald's?
It goes to Travertine at Murdoch's.
Yeah, the city limits goes all the way out. to
Okay, because I did call Judy, because I noticed that last big snow and I still see it. I saw it yesterday or day before, whenever we had our last snow. People are walking on the highway and on the shoulder because starting at Town and Country, going to south to Murdoch's, and then what would that be? Well, anyway, across the street, the lumberyard or whatever is on that side of the street. That sidewalk is not being done. And it's not good. And I know some people try and take the bike path, but then sometimes people are more comfortable, especially all the kids that walk and go to McDonald's and, the little strip mall and all that. In there, they want to stay, you're just naturally bound to stay on that side of the highway. Or Park Street, I don't know where you change the wording from. Anyway, Park Road to Park Street, but that's an issue, and I did tell Judy about it, and I don't know that it's still been remedied because this last snow I saw somebody walking out there on the shoulder again. Also, I was away for 17 years. Other than that, Livingston is my home. I've not seen a place where the snow removal ordinance gives you 24 hours. I just thought that's amazing that they have a whole day to deal with their sidewalks. I mean, I'm only 64 and already I'm tiptoeing around sometimes. I think maybe if we could take a look at the ordinance and maybe scoot it back and give them so many hours, like by noon. I don't know how postal carriers and other people do it. I honestly was not aware of what, I could check into where I used to live and see what their time frame is as far as the big snow. Because I think, that's a long time. Also, I was really discouraged. The last time we had a big snow, I have a van, and I went to go to First Interstate, and I came around on calendar, and I saw the snow had not been removed after a big snow, so I pulled all the way forward to the corner and backed up so that I had my tracks to leave in. I still got stuck and had to be towed from my parking spot. It used to be the city crews, the snow removal crews, they knew what the weather forecast was, or somebody called everybody and said, okay, starting at midnight, we're gonna get the snow removed, get it all moved to the middle of it. The downtown business district, I think, should set an example and be clean and clear. And if they don't start at midnight, it depends on how long it's snowing. I mean, we have to use common sense. But I think by the time 8 in the morning rolls around, the downtown business district should be cleared. And it shouldn't be a matter of budget, because what you do is, let's say, 4 men, have to go out and plow the snow before 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, then you give them, I don't know the term, not comp time, but then they don't get paid time and a half or double time, whatever the law is, but they get time off for those hours that they work. I think it's crucial that the downtown business district, when we have, which is rare anymore, big dumps, that people can't come downtown and not risk getting stuck. I was so angry. I mean, it was unbelievable, because it didn't used to be that way. And I was a young girl growing up. I don't know what they did, but I do know that they did have the downtown clean by 8 in the morning. And the business people, it should be, the sidewalks, but the streets, especially, everything was always pushed in the middle. And we used to get really big snows. Sarah and I are the only ones here that remember what things used to be like as far as snowfall in Livingston. But I think it's crucial that the business districts are, that it's clean by 8 in the morning. I didn't think there's any reason it shouldn't be. And then when the merchants start showing up for work, some of them I know don't open till 10, that their sidewalks are done. As far as, you know, things like that, like Mel, you have your neighbor that the house is vacant. Well, you contact Judy and she should find out who that business owner is. I don't know who it is now, but just even when there's a vacant house, they're still responsible and still should be getting ticketed. And it does take people sticking up. As far as several things we've addressed tonight, I'm just gonna backpedal a minute to the transportation issue and the intersections and stuff. We used to have welcome wagon and everybody got a, yes.
So we moved on to the street or the sidewalk cleaning.
Yes.
If you want to comment.
Yes, okay, I'll keep it to that.
Wait till public comment, okay?
Oh, okay. It
You
used
can
to,
go back to something we already.
Okay.
closed for discussion.
yes, okay, I didn't think of, okay, as far as the snow removal, we used to have welcome wagon, and when people moved to town, they got an information packet that told them about the shoveling ordinance, when the street sweeper was coming and all that stuff. We don't have welcome wagon anymore, obviously, which was spearheaded through the Chamber of Commerce, but I would like to suggest a saturation mailing. When I lived on South B, I paid city utilities, so I got that little green brochure every spring with my utility bill. Now I don't pay city utilities where I am on Yellowstone, so I have to go find that brochure, and I think every resident, whether they're renting or a landowner, I think a saturation mailing once or maybe twice a year, and I know it's expensive, I'd be willing to help out with the envelope stuffing, or however it's implemented, to let people know that their walks need to be done, because not everybody gets the enterprise anymore that used to be, but that I'd like to recommend that. You know, for any of these issues that come up, is the public needs to be informed, because we can't have like the police issuing all these citations and having them be babysitters everywhere when the public doesn't know. Because, you know, like, well, I can't backtrack, but I know a lot of people have a sense for things being a certain way, and I just tell people as much as I can, it's right of way at intersections. But anyway, a saturation mailing does inform the public of what the city ordinances are. But so
Right,
thank you.
I do have one question, Shannon or Mike, on this. Who is responsible for clearing the sidewalk that goes under the overpass, under the interstate over to McDonald's?
Kim DT. Yep.
So they do sometimes clear it. I
They
have
do.
seen them. Is it, how regularly do they do it? Are they daily if it's snowing, or how?
I know they've done a really good job of hitting it within a day or two after an event, because their plow trucks plow snow onto the sidewalks, and then they usually bring a skid steer or a UTV with the snow blower on the front and broom it off. You know, we've helped them quite a few times with doing Veterans Bridge, just because it's close to Public Works, but I think they do a good job. I mean, I certainly don't have a problem with following up with Kyle DeMars and the local staff here to reinforce that they keep an eye on that.
I have witnessed people walking in the street as well, trying to avoid the sidewalk, but it could have been just a timing thing. I happened to be there right after the snowfall. Thank you for checking on it. We'll move on to action item C.
Public comment? If I may.
Yes, you may. Sorry.
Tricia Grabo, 204 East Calhoun Street. I think that the way we do snow removal is probably the least cost-effective way that we could possibly do it. I know that I took a picture of snow snow removal equipment. And took it to some of my friends who are, who know what that equipment's worth. About $750,000 worth of equipment that was being used on the corner of Yellowstone and Calendar Street. In New York City and New York State, they completely gave up snow removal by the public sector. Because here's the public sector investing in all this equipment that is only used part of the year. So what they did was they went to the private sector, both in New York City and New York State, and they just simply said, here's your contract. Within so much time after the snow occurs, those streets better be clean or you're gonna lose your contract.
So
Those private sector
Tricia,
folks.
are you referring to sidewalks? Because our
I know,
discussion
but
is on
here,
snow
let
removal
me
by
finish.
residents
I know,
versus
but
the city.
let me finish if I may. So the private sector carries the burden for depreciation, for the expense of the equipment, everything else. And what we do is we have great pride in our building. So if you look at the Gravo, you will not find snow on our sidewalks, period. But then we have streets that are filthy and we never clean them up with, the city never cleans them up with their equipment when it's warm. And then we have deep snow, we have clean sidewalks, but we have deep snow in front of our building. So how can you incentivize people to take great pride, which we do, and then have the city not take pride in the appearance of our downtown, when there is a cost-effective way to do it that works so much better? I mean, the city needs to start exploring this, please. It's called cost-effective.
Thank you. So moving on to action item C, which is to discuss strategic plans, our next steps, which we had talked about at the end of our strategic planning session last Thursday. One of the things that has come to me and to other commissioners, I know, is that the community wants to have input as to what they want for our community as well. And the strategic planning had to do with our big picture, what are the organizational intent of the city and the commission working with the city to get those things done. And I would like a short discussion on what we see the commission and the city doing to include the community in strategic planning beyond what we've already done, the work we have done. We still have goal setting, or some of our goal setting, some of our various things that we still need to do as a city entity. But I want to think forward as to what we can do to include the community. So I'd love some feedback or comments. Sure.
Trying to think of the gentleman's name who was the facilitator. Help me out. Blake, thank you. So I think, as you were saying, Jerome, we need to still finish our goal setting here. Is that all we needed to do is do our goals? Is that what's left for our component?
The commission needs to just define the goals. You guys actually already chosen the goals.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to give the one sentence descriptions of what that means.
Okay.
We did the balance.
And then wasn't it that Blake was discussing for a more enhanced community strategic plan, that's not necessarily something that the city would spearhead, that it's really an engagement of the interested parties involved, whether it's, well, I think we want the downtown businesses, et cetera, but I'm not sure that's exactly the role of the city to implement that, or, I mean, we can definitely maybe provide the venue and attend, but I'm trying to think of what his exact, if anyone has a better recollection of how he described that.
That would be, he was referring to, so this is the organizational strategic plan just for the city. So it's our piece of the pie, he described it. If you want to do an actual community strategic plan, that'd be a much bigger undertaking that would require all the different venues of the city. So it would take the business community, the faith community, the nonprofits, the school, the hospital, the large, the chamber. It would take all of those to come together and create a community strategic plan, where this is just a city organizational strategic plan. Now, if we want feedback on the city organizational strategic plan, I think that's still feasible, but it'd be a much smaller effort than the entire community strategic plan.
Perhaps similar to what we've already done, our own public meeting, allowing the public to be involved. I'm wondering if the Park County Community Foundation would want to spearhead something like that.
Blake mentioned, didn't get into specifics with it, but he does facilitate those kind of things. And there's specific things, that you'd want to set up and how to engage the community to do it and stuff like that. So I think he'd be a prime source, if we wanted to look into that and say, what's the best way to go about that? Because he did say he has facilitated those reports.
So I'm thinking maybe a communication. It's Peter Fox, still the director of the Community Foundation. Maybe I'm not sure whose role it would be to make it, have a conversation with Peter Fox and have him getting community. First of all, do they think that this would be a good idea, or do hook them up with Blake, and because the foundation may be also the way to fund it, to pay for the facilitators' time, etc. And I'm just throwing that out there as a brainstorming. I'm not sure that's our best option, and that may, as a community, because what do we define our community? I mean, we have our goals as a city. The county has their goals, but would we want this community to be incorporating city and county together, and incorporating entities from both? I think that's also a discussion, but I'm not sure that's our role to make that determination or decision.
Appreciate that.
I think what you're talking about is a growth policy. Which I wanted. The growth policy would involve the general public, but it would be spearheaded, I think, by an MSU type person. And that's where you get your input on the general population. And we haven't done a growth policy, I think, that's totally different. Yeah, no. But it's a good exercise. This may have strengths and weaknesses in people thinking.
I like the idea of us being at the table, the city as just one of the players at the table, and then inviting, and I don't think it is our role as a city to invite or to start that process. Mostly for time's sake, I think that can be done. Adding that to your plate and to the city's plate, I think, isn't something that I would want or would recommend. But I think having us on the team and in the strategic planning as a community versus a city, maybe it's a better word. I like that idea, Sarah, and then possibly asking one of the other organizations like the community. Park County Community Foundation to help spearhead it. I think that other cities that I've looked at have done it similar to that, with it being led really by multiple people versus just one entity. And so I think we could be part of it with our knowledge, but would not like to see us leading it as well, like you're saying. What's more? Oh, sorry.
The county just recently completed a growth policy, and their approach, and they had a much more difficult time because you're talking about geographically, you're talking about the entire county. And what they did was they held meetings in all the different towns throughout the county. And it was, the policy itself was put together by a professional organization. It was not written by the county. They already have the data from, and very recent data from the county, including Livingston. They held meetings and actually did surveys of the population, at least those who were willing to show up. And so as far as an approach goes, the county sponsored the organization that wrote the growth policy. And I communicate fairly regularly with Peter Fox, and he was instrumental in that effort. And that might be the best approach for the city to accomplish the same thing. Because I think the last official growth policy is supposed to be, I believe, every 5 years, and I think the last time was like 2003, someplace in that area. But it was done through a professional organization.
So are there any recommendations that we want to make at this time regarding the strategic plan for the city, or for
Well, I
the
guess, yeah.
community?
I think we do that. Yeah, first.
Kind of decide is it a growth policy or
I think,
strategic planning have? Are they one and the same?
I think
I
it's two big different items. I mean, the growth policy
That's what I was
I think they're completely two different, that the growth policy is our responsibility.
Right.
And I think it's a different animal. I think the strategic plan of the community is its own animal, and, maybe if it, for goodwill, I don't know, Terrell, if maybe you want to have a communication with Mr. Caldwell, to say, hey, we both entities, I know they've just completed their strategic plan. Community wants involvement, maybe we can find an organization that wants to spearhead this and
ask Peter, about what he knows. He's done this a long time, and worked with communities. So maybe he has suggestions on how he can help move this process forward as well. And talking with him, so Steve and Peter, anyone else, because I'll make
I think just to get it.
touching base with Blake one
Yeah, this is at the same time.
time. Right.
Yeah, I would just say, it's gonna be local government center, Blake actually took a different job.
Oh, did he already?
He's departing in this month.
God. Well, Dan Clark,
Yeah, Dan,
Yeah.
but it's a local government center.
Okay.
But I think it's, perhaps making a suggestion to a third party to take it over.
Right.
It's kind of,
And that's where I think.
we can
Dan
just.
could mention, this is how it's been done in, this community or that community.
Right, yeah, so
That's
just,
what I'm looking for.
yeah. We're just putting the goodwill out there, that we've heard from our constituents that they want to put together a plan.
Now, do we want to have a due date on finishing this, like to turn it in future?
I thought we would do it together.
Well, you're gonna have to decide on how you wanna do the last portion.
Oh, okay.
I think I don't know if we need a facilitator to do that or not, but I just think another couple hours.
I like the
bang it out.
process.
Yeah, I did
You
too.
know, I like it,
Yeah.
having that kind of interaction, not with just each other, but other people coming into it,
Yeah.
and to conversation. I thought that added a lot.
Yeah, we'll see
Um,
further.
Yeah, I think we should meet. I agree that it should be a meeting of open meeting as and planned. I would prefer it into March, but just like getting into like we have 1, 2, 3 Tuesdays left.
Do we, I'm just thinking of the correlation with then, you know, once we have this, I mean, I know Mike, you know, kind of put together his own goals and provided to us, but I'm just trying to keep track of the calendar as far as, you know, for us setting the city manager goals. If we have this completed, it'll be easy for us to drive our goals for the city manager.
So our next.
I mean, we're right down to just the last thing here. I don't think we need a whole lot of time. Do you?
It's a couple hours.
Really that long?
Well, maximum, how's that?
Yeah. I mean, especially if we have time to think about it. We've been through it. Yeah, whatever. I don't care. I just.
Well, and then the second city manager evaluation will be in April. Which would help to have this by that time. Should we try and go with the last week of February? Does that look like, or next Tuesday?
Get it done.
Well, I guess the question would be, do people think we need a facilitator? Because that would dictate the schedule too.
I like the process. I like
I like having this located.
because it was efficient and we were focused and we knew exactly.
Yeah,
How to
get it
work
back or something like that.
Yeah, we actually would be in, so
Yeah.
you think we probably will be doing that like that. I can see what we have to do.
And get back to us.
Something like that.
Well, most Tuesdays work for me. I mean, other than, of course, we have commission and we've got the 13th and the 27th. 13th is probably late, early. And then Thursdays. I would like it towards the end of the month.
Yeah, well, we'll see what
That's just one.
Dan comes up with.
Yeah.
And for time, I can do, 5:30, 6.
That worked good last time. Okay,
Okay, so that's what we find out.
right.
So we are up to public comment. Any community public comment, please come to the podium. Please state your name and address.
Tricia Graber, 204 East Calendar Street. I first of all want to thank you so much for involving the public in the strategic planning process and even having the strategic planning process. I think it is like setting a really signage for where the city can possibly go. I'm so enormously appreciative of listening to the public on this. So whatever you come up with, it's going to be appreciated. Not that people like me will get the word out as much as we can. That can be kind of fun to get it even in the garbage bills or someplace. I want to make a comment on planning for, I'm going to go back to parking for just a minute, because when I was on the city commission, Vision Livingston became a Main Street project. And so Urban Renewal funded me as a city commissioner to go to the Main Street conference. Now, one of the biggest sections of the National Main Street Conference was parking. So we had 3 days, and I chose to go to 2 days of that into the parking area. It would be just so enriching for the city commissioners to be able to, or even some of the city commissioners to be able to go to the National Main Street Conference. It's amazing because you see towns smaller than us coming up with great parking plans, and then you can see how they do it across this country. You connect with all these other places in the United States. So I just think it'd be great to take a serious look. And by the way, you can go on the website for the National Main Street Conference and you can look up parking. It's just a wonderful resource. I want to make one comment about garbage and recycling. We really sold the transfer station on the fact that we were going to recycle. The community was so engaged in believing in recycling that they were willing to do whatever they needed to do. But especially with the glass, I don't know if you know that there's a small paragraph that the legislature passed that said that the city has the option of requiring everybody in the city to get their garbage from the city, that the city commission can do this. So when that was first passed, then Bozeman had all their garbage done by the city, Livingston and so forth. Then, and we have been not denied, since that was passed, the option of going to the private sector. Now, when I did research, when I was on the commission, we're up to $183 or so a ton. When I did the research, Bozeman said, heck no. The businesses said, heck no. We want to have the option of going to the private sector. We want just a little competition here. And it turns out that they were down to $67 a ton, and we're still paying $183 a ton. Billings finally threw out the mandatory garbage done by the city and allowed the businesses to go to the private sector. And again, it was a choice. At least the businesses had the choice. And the cost savings were pretty significant. We said, okay, we were thrilled about our, we didn't think it through very well, frankly. Our glass pulverizer, I was there when we got our glass pulverizer. We didn't realize that the workers would be breathing that glass. I mean, we didn't look at the downside of the pulverizer. But I believe that we are in Livingston, one of the few things that's a saving grace for our businesses, our bars and so forth, was we're paying $183 a ton when we should be paying we could go to the private sector and maybe get it at 67. But there was always this, places like my good friend at the Stockman, at least she could get rid of her glass and begin to save enough money to be able to stay in business. And so I think that was one of the things that kept us from really rebelling and saying, come on, we gotta get that option of going to the private sector. I believe we should now. I think our businesses, I have been held hostage long enough. We shouldn't have to get our garbage just from the city. We should be able to choose private or public sector on our garbage collection. And if we get rid of our pulverizing system and our glass, we not only charge 3 times as much as the private sector, but then we don't even take the glass anymore. I mean, what are we trying to do to our businesses as far as I'm concerned? So at least we should look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Oh, someone else. Maybe someone's behind you. Oh, someone's behind you. He was going to. Please state your name and.
Don Platek, 229 South Yellowstone. There's been a lot of discussion about code enforcement tonight, just some, general, the snow removal. Parking, I think, fits in that as well. So, code enforcement is really critical for communities. If you don't do it, you can just see them go. You see it, the urban communities in the 70s and 80s, small communities don't enforce code, it's detrimental. But specifically, I want to talk about parking. I asked my wife this weekend, I said, hey, let's take a ride, short ride. I'd like to go and just count trailers, campers. She just rolls her eyes. But she humors me, she goes with me. So I'm talking, it was a 6 or 8 minute drive. Probably 10, 12 blocks we went down. And would like to guess how many campers, trailers, boats were out there. Anybody want to guess?
A lot.
50.
You're pretty close. 44. And some of these were big. You know, they weren't just a little trailer. It was motorhomes, 28, 30 footers. So you're talking maybe 60 parking spots. And I'm talking 10 or 12 blocks. I don't want to be the guy that comes up here and complains. So I'm offering an easy solution. It's used throughout the country. No overnight parking of that stuff. Period. Problem solved. We live in communities, they don't allow it. Got a big bass boat, never park on the street. They don't allow it. It cleans the community up. So my suggestion is change that ordinance. Because I talked to Michael and Jay, I'm so frustrated. It's hard for them to enforce it. I hate to call the non-emergency number because it's a waste of the police time to try to enforce somebody moving a trailer. Frustrating to the citizens, terrible for the whole community. No overnight parking, problem solved. And I would volunteer my time. I'll go out there at midnight and I'll write the ticket. Or I'll take the pictures, give it to whoever and say, violation. Within 2 months, problem solved. So just my suggestion, no overnight parking. Change that ordinance because it can't really be enforced. And it is frustrating. I got a neighbor constantly doing it. I've talked to Michael and Jay both. Help. They can't. Well, they can because legally the city has to enforce ordinances. It's not right for the citizen to go, I'm gonna have to file a lawsuit, waste my own money, when I already paid taxes for you to do it. So please, change that ordinance, no overnight parking. Questions, comments?
What
All
is
right.
that? 7, 5 days. 5 days.
Well,
So we don't allow campers or trailers to be parked more than 5 days?
5 consecutive days on any city street. And I even offered, I have 24/7 surveillance. I said, Michael, even the police, why it's such a waste of their resources. Every day I call and say, it's still there, it's still there, it's still there. So on day 5, they can write the ticket. When day 5 comes, I don't know what's going on. I can't write the ticket. And that trailer stays there.
The first year I was on the commission, we put tickets on what you're talking about. They were about ready to kill us. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, we're in the rights of what we were doing, and it was an uproar because we were enforcing the code. And
The only one that has the uproar are the people breaking the code. And Montana said, and even Jay, he could even find this case law. Financial and economic conditions of the people violating those ordinances never stands up in court. Ticket them. They're gonna learn, get it out of here. It's better for the whole community. Not those, 8 or 10, offenders that have their trailers all over. You've got one across to you, it's been there for months.
I know what you mean, yeah. I'm gonna wear a bulletproof vest if you're gonna go out. That's all.
Change the ordinance, I'll do it.
Any more public comments?
I think Lindy Gibson, and I'm also on Yellowstone Street. I think he's got a good point. I remember when it changed and we started allowing trailers and things like that to be parked on the streets, and it was a sad thing with me. It was kind of cosmetic, but there's like in front of Holbrook, not in front of Holbrook, but on 5th, there's a gold truck with a trailer, and he works at the depot center, and he parks there, and they've all but begged him to move that, even on calendar where it's not been developed, or on calendar between 5th and 6th where it's not to be developed. I'd like to see the ordinance change, but then I don't own any of that stuff, and so I don't have any desire to have that in front of my place. But anyway, back to anytime we have, what I see lacking in Livingston is ever since Welcome Wagon went out of business, and it was Gail Jockers, and she took it on as, because she was working at the chamber, is to educate the public, because oftentimes, well, I'm sure the law enforcement can back up some of it. Oftentimes, people are approached and they have no idea what the ordinances were. Like in Livingston, you yield the right of way, and yet I know people that don't live here feel that Clark, Lewis, and Calendars are just, they should all be, through streets, because it feels right, and it does. But anyway, I think educating the public on what our ordinances are will be a big help, because, there's nothing worse than having hard feelings with your neighbors when you didn't even know what was going on. And I think that'll help, because we want to stay user-friendly. We shouldn't need bulletproof vests, but I know what it's like to report people also, because I had said something about that gold pickup pulling the utility trailer being parked in front of Holbrook. And I was told by somebody in law enforcement that as long as their license plate tab had not expired, they had a right to park there. I don't know if that was the truth or not, but that was very discouraging, because I said, isn't there a 72-hour ordinance? But obviously I was wrong. I didn't know it was 5 days, but he'll park it there forever. And they begged and pleaded and written nice, friendly notes every time, and it just doesn't matter to him. And that's tough, because we have to set the example and be a good neighbor. We teach by leading, but there are rascals that they're just going to push the bar in law enforcement, or even in being a good neighbor. People don't always know things. And so anyway, that's my suggestion. Another thing on the recycling, is there any reason that we can't use, where the incinerator used to be across the road and up a couple blocks? Is there any reason those green things can't be parked in there and then picked up and dumped by whoever's got the contract? There's still a wind issue with, and most people stay away from recycling on windy days, but even when it's not that windy, I've taken stuff out there, and I've literally chased plastic for a whole block clear down to where all the trees and shrubs are, just because a gust of wind came up and took that. And that fence has litter on it all the time. If I have the time, I'm always going around and picking up stuff that obviously blew out of someone's hands. I mean, Livingston and wind, those words are synonymous. Is there any reason we can't use the old incinerator building and park those green doodahs in there for people to use, so the wind isn't an issue?
It's not city property.
Who owns the incinerator? Oh, the county. Is there any reason we can't approach them about that?
We could, but we keep it inside the city property so that we can control access to it.
So the county isn't allowed to recycle?
Well, there's hours.
Well, I know there's hours, but aren't people outside the city limits bringing in their recycling as well?
Yes.
So they can use that, but we're not allowed to move it over there. Have they been approached, Michael? I don't even know.
No, we prefer where it's at, just because we can control it a lot easier. We've already set it up with the fences.
But there's no such thing as just closing the overhead doors and then it's obviously not open? No.
Well, it's not our facility, so where we have it set up works pretty well, because we also have to be able to get the semis in and pull them.
Oh yeah, that's what I was asking. Yeah, because I didn't know, because that used to be our incinerator. Okay, this is probably not the right time to bring that up, but I wondered. Okay, thank you.
Other public comment? Commissioner comments? Commissioner Maybe? I mean, sorry. City manager comments. Thanks for.
I will keep them super short tonight. Just an update on the website. We have regained control over the new website, so they finished the upgrade. There'll probably be probably 3 or 4 weeks of making sure that all the information's up to date. We should be able to release it at that time. That's all I have.
2 or 3 weeks.
Probably 3 or 4. Which also means that next commission meeting, wear your nice clothes, because we're gonna do a group photo for your picture.
We always look nice. We're talking.
Even nicer.
What do you advertise?
Wait,
My movie show.
Commissioner Maybe. Any comments?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Sandberg.
When were we gonna have our litigation, meeting?
Probably towards the end of the month.
Okay. Towards the end of this month?
Yeah.
Okay,
Would be probably the last 2 weeks.
okay. Just trying to think, since we're already gonna try and reschedule, or try and schedule the finished, do we have a heavy agenda for the second commission meeting, then it could be Reggie pack on the back of that,
Usually do it before.
or before, or whatever?
If we could start I think we could do the litigation update like 5:30 and then roll into the commission meeting at 6:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we've done.
We'll shoot for either the 20th or the 2nd.
Okay,
So
cool.
one of those two. Let's see what my case.
So who else hasn't turned in the biography besides me?
Everyone.
Cool, okay. That's it, thank you.
Commissioner
I'm
Freeman.
good. Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Schwartz.
I just have one thing, James Bennett, was holding, Saturday listening sessions, and I've, taken that upon myself to start doing it again.
I
Second
was gonna
Saturday
talk
of the
about
month.
that too.
So I'm looking for anybody who might wanna join me this Saturday at 8:30 at the Food Resource.
This Saturday?
What ungodly hour do you do that?
Huh? What?
What ungodly hour of the morning?
8:30. 8:30 to 9:30.
I
Sometimes
remember
runs to
James
10.
told me coffee was on and all those things, and it never was.
Yeah, no, yeah. Although, Michael, McCormick has offered to, host a light breakfast at some point if all 5 of us want to meet on the Saturday there.
Okay.
We're not making decisions.
We would just have to notice it.
We can notice it, but we're not making decisions. We can take a comment, listening session. So keep that in back in mind. He thought that might be nice to, maybe we get more people.
You need somebody this Saturday?
Yeah, I don't, but whoever would like to.
I can join you if you want.
Or unless Warren wants to try it once, or.
You want to
Yeah,
try?
I don't think I have anything else.
Oh, okay, then no more. But if you want to, you can have.
Okay.
Well, and I was going to talk about the listening session as well, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, just, I want to keep it going. I mean, it doesn't have to be me hosting it either. I mean, just as long as one of us, does it. It's the second Saturday of the month. I think it's a good idea. It gives people a chance.
Yeah.
Don't want to come out at night. I yield.
And I have nothing.
Wow. Really?
I know. So I entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
There was, have a motion and
A
a
little too fast
second.
for it.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is adjourned at 8:53.
I called you on your
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You'll be around tomorrow morning. I think it looks good. I think we're doing it again. Well, this is really bad. Yeah. Oh, I thought I done it for garbage. Nobody said it's good. I got a couple questions. It looks good, but okay, that's right. That's why. So I'm like, why are we doing it again? Yeah. Okay. But you can be around. Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you a call around 9. Okay.